All right. Um, I will be the only one in this discussion, so it's not really a discussion, but me kind of just going over the assignment, probably talking to myself, thinking out loud, um, in the sake of not being able to communicate with my group members. And I know that a few have been meeting already, and I'm not too sure where to go from here. So I think I'm just going to continue doing it on my own, which I think it still works and I'm able to still learn. Um, and so I had a very fun time reading these stories, these poems that deal with a very heavy topic of race and racism. Um, excuse the background noises, but as I'm looking at the questions for the discussion, some of it is, what does it mean to be Black in these poems and the short story? What is Black experience here? In what ways does society shape what it means to be Black? And in what ways do these writers of the poems and story respond to that and make a concept of identity for these speakers? And the three stories or poems that we were given to read were Harlem, very popular, Langston Hughes, Theme for English B, and Brownies by ZZ Packer, which was in our textbook. And I just had finished reading that one, and I felt really refreshed on this topic from that story because I've never heard of that. I've heard of Harlem, and then Theme for English B I'm familiar with, but Brownies, and I probably will start with that story, was very different for me because I'm able to see it in a story. And we read stories about race and color, but having it be within young girls, and their kind of, take on, how to address or act or behave, towards the opposite color of them, was really interesting to read about. So I think I'll start with those questions for Brownies, where it talks about what it means to be Black in this story. And it starts off with the girls going to the camp, and the narrator being Snot or Laurel, and her thoughts in the story on the whole situation of the main idea, the whole situation of what's going on. And with Arnett and Octavia, wow, really rambunctious girls. And I think for this story and for what it means to be Black for them, I feel, as when I was reading it, that they have to defend themselves. They have to not defend maybe personally, like, themselves, and maybe in this story it is kind of themselves, but they have to defend something. They feel as though they have to defend their race. They have to defend who they are as a whole, collectively. Not in a sense where it's like, they did this to me, I'm gonna protect myself. And I mean, maybe it did come off in that way because accusing that the Troop 909 called them what they call them, and for them to feel as though like, we have to go and seek revenge, we have to go and fight back, that was the idea. And so I feel like what it means in this particular story to be Black is to always feel like you have to protect and defend yourself and your people and your race. What is Black experience here? In what ways does society shape what it means to be Black? As I was getting to the end of the story, right, when we find out that the girls are with special needs, that everything just changed right there. I felt like that was just like a plot twist. Like, I was not expecting that to happen and to learn of that. And so for Arnett to still have that, well, she called me this, she did call me this, and well, she doesn't speak. She can, but she doesn't speak. That was just a little bit more eye-opening, because we see that again, like they have a need. They have a need to defend themselves and to point fingers and to continue that mindset or the legacy of white, black, colored, light-skinned people, lighter complexion, Caucasian, as they're referred to in the story. And so I feel that the Black experience, or what society shaped it to be, is to continue what past has taught us, to continue to separate themselves from, this group, just, lighter skinned people or Caucasian people. And so that was very interesting, very, very, very shocking to me to learn that they were special needs and had disabilities. And so I think that just kind of just made me think of everything in whole like that, even after learning of that. These girls are, this girl still had that mindset in her, and that just goes to show how much she knows of this separation, I think. In what ways do these writers respond to that and make a concept of identity for these speakers? And I think that we see that concept maybe in Snot, the narrator of the story, as she explains right in the story at the end of these people. And I have it on here, but I'm not trying to jump back and forth in my reading. But this religious group doing anything you tell them to do, whether it's service, and it seems like it's more service acts. And so, right, to kind of learn that this man, and I think it said he brought his family with him, were painting the porch of Snot's father in their family's house, and it just made them think of as if he's scrubbing his floor. The white man's scrubbing the Black man's porch, and for him, and mention that he didn't say thank you. And then to have that in mind that, we need to seek revenge, it was kind of like, it's his turn, it's he's done it to me for so long, the white man's done it to me for so long that, it's finally his turn to taste that medicine that he's given our people for so long, And so I think it gave her a voice, in a sense that that's kind of the reality of today, that we kind of do seek for revenge on the other race. And it's in the perfect world that wouldn't have took place, or that wouldn't have happened, or that would not have happened. But it's not a perfect world, and so I feel like it gave, again, Snot that idea, or it placed into the audience from Snot's story of her father, that it's one kind of hopes for, punishment, or for the tables to turn, I think is what I'm trying to say. Next story, theme for English B. And I think for me, I just needed to read it a little bit more in depth. Because I know, right, in poetry, in writing, not everything is surface level, dig deeper. And so for me to just dive into the reading, right, we understand that it's professor, instructor asking the students, to write, and it seems to write about themselves, what comes out of them. And as I'm reading more into it, of course, we understand that the speaker of the poem is a Black, I would say a Black male, but a colored person. And that's what I'm looking at right now. I'm just reading the story, so it's just kind of referring to it, that he questions his identity, being that he is the only student, he or she is the only college student in the class of white dominant class. And it makes reference to where he lives, Harlem, right? New York, Harlem Renaissance. And even specifically to then I crossed St. Nicholas, 8th Avenue, 7th, and then just kind of makes you picture in your mind the distance that he has to travel just to get to school. You know, and I think further into that, you think, look how far he has to go to learn, to obtain an education versus his white classmates who maybe live up the road or, you know, have easy access. It seems like he has to walk, right? He has to walk. They can get dropped off. They have, you know, the resources are there for them and are not for him. Because as he goes on to mention later on in the poem that, right, his professor is older and is white. He has more freedom than him and somewhat more free. There's more freedom from him. So I think he kind of mentions him being limited on the resources that he's able to have for himself, and not just the resources, but the opportunities there too, right? I feel it just, again, shows the segregation of things, of him and his classmates specifically. Let me see what else he says here. Yeah. And reading it, right, he kind of just compares himself or tries to show the similarities between him and his classmates, as if, you know, likes to eat, sleep, drink, and be in love, as we all do. Yet to him, is it different because he's colored? We see it say, so the page that he's even writing on, should it be colored because it's white, right? And that just goes to point out his life and what he is well aware of going into college, as it seems, right? Because he says that he's 21. He or she, the speaker. And so kind of going into his experience, I mean, I think I answered the experience part. What it means to be Black, right? He's aware of the differences and what he's limited to in society and in his own life. In what ways does the writer respond to that? And again, I think I mentioned too, where he compares himself to his classmates and even his professor and his instructor, that they have more to life, or more of life. I wouldn't say more of life, but they have more to life, and they have, again, we know this, they have more than what he's able to have. And so the speaker kind of just portrays that, in a sense, you know, that within everything I would state, his freedom, his transportation, it goes on to that, right? His transportation to even get to school. And in what ways, right, does it, excuse me, I just can't talk today. Does society shape what it means to be Black? And I feel like he's kind of the essence of it in his thinking. That why is it so different for him or her to just basically live the way we all live. If I'm bringing back, right, I like to work and read and learn and understand life, and like a Pipe for Christmas, and, you know, his music, records of Bessie and Bop and all of this. But because, you know, he is not of the same color or race as his classmates, that is he not able to like those things. And so I think it's in society, we kind of, again, differentiate that between who was allowed to like what, who was allowed to do the things that we all like to do today, which, quoting back into what he has mentioned in the poem. And so I think that kind of goes to define what society says about this particular poem. And lastly, and hopefully I'm making sense along the way. I know like when I get my mind on something, I have all these thoughts, but I have a hard time just explaining it clearly, I think is a thing. And so hopefully I'm coming across clear and answering the questions in the way it needs to be answered. And lastly, Harlem by Langston Hughes. Okay, let me pull it up. I'm just kind of closing my windows I have open with my readings, with the different readings. So it's only 3, so I'm trying to close the last 2. Okay. And I just want to keep making sure, that's why I keep looking, sorry, just keeping track of the questions and making sure I'm going over those for each of the 3 poems and stories. Okay. And I close the wrong one. Okay. And again, we know this is a very short one, but yet it speaks volumes in the theme and the messages that come across. Sorry. Okay. So again, right, opens up with what happens to a dream deferred. Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And when you think of that, a raisin in the sun, already I feel like when I hear the word raisin, and what comes to mind is it's sprinkly. It's, everything is kind of like sucked out of it because it's just so dry. And so I feel like even in the way that Langston is describing his message in the poem, you already think specifically on certain things within history because of the way it's being described, as if, dry in the sun like a raisin, or festering like a sore. I feel like not a lot of us in regular conversation would say something that's fester. And you think fester, I feel like it's something, it's not pleasant. And it's kind of, it seems really like dramatic to me. And so I feel like just with these specific details, you're able to kind of capture just how significant the message of the poem is. And I feel like I'm kind of saying that in a different way each time, but I feel like it really is that, because, right, stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrup seat. Maybe it just sags, like a heavy load, or does it explode? These are just, like dramatic descriptions. And so already you know that this is something very important to kind of analyze, to kind of break down. And if I'm referring back to the questions, it's right, what does it mean to be Black in this? And so sticking to the same concept, what is Black experience? And so, we know that it's referring to the American dream for African Americans, because everyone wants the opportunity, or we know it to be privilege of freedom, of rights, of equality, right? We know all this. But it's not entirely, accessible for them at this point, not now, but in history. And so we're reading it. Bring that tone to it. And again, I think piggybacking on what I was saying about, the words being kind of dramatic in their description, that it just paints like a dark tone, a dark feeling, that we know that this dream, right, being deferred, or the dream for them, for African Americans, is dwindling. It doesn't feel like, like it's there, but not where they want it to be. And for for it to ask the, definition of Black in this particular poem, and it being titled Harlem, right? Harlem, I think of it as the Harlem Renaissance, which I think it's referring to that, in the time of this, music and all this that came to give the people hope that, after, the Great Depression and everything that kind of like went down, you kind of go back into that same slump again. But it just kind of says, like, is this dream ever going to be obtained? Is this something that they're going to achieve in the near future or in the future at all? And just keeping in mind those, again, stinking, crusting, over exploding. These are just like violent feelings, and each kind of just makes the reader feel, makes the reader taste, makes the reader think about their own dreams that are discarded, a concept. So with the writer, again, with what Langston is trying to say, that is, I think, the concept of the identity of the speakers. Is this ever going to be obtainable for them? And I feel like, opening that other one, I feel also that he doesn't mean for it to come off as if this is not attainable, but that it will slowly kind of like decline. Like it seemed as if it's, like a ball on the hill. Like, you push it so much, something happens and it falls right back down and you start again. You push, and you try, and, like you have all these aspirations and all these desires and wants for yourself and for this community of African Americans, that you try so much and you just seem to not make any success or see any success happen. So does it explode? Is it a heavy load? And so that's what kind of made me understand it better in that analogy, to understand, what this dream might mean for them and how it's making them feel in the present or at the time, it's written in 1951. And so those are just some of my thoughts. And I'm pretty sure if I had some of my classmates in here they would help me think straight, because I feel like too in previous discussions, I could just go all over the place, and like with the help of my classmates, it helped, to narrow it in. But I feel that I tried my best to kind of cover the topics of each of these 3 readings and answer the questions to the best of my ability. So I hope, we have a couple of more discussions left, but, I'm going to try my best to just get out there, get the word out. But if not, and I don't know if my messages are coming through, because even in the past, like, no one's really responded. So maybe it's just not working. Maybe people are just not really available. So I'm just going to continue to do this. And if my roommates are watching, it would be wonderful if we can discuss. But if not, we have to do what we have to do. So with that, that is the end. And I'm pretty sure I went over everything. Using quotation marks, and I just have to kind of just like verbally tell myself as a reminder, because no one's watching this, but such Timothy. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next discussion.